Do you want to wait 1 more minute or let's start?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe
one more minute, please.
we should.
Maybe when we are waiting, I'm going to take a quick screenshot, so smile. I always take this opportunity. So 3, 2, 1. Okay, you are all beautiful. Thank you very much. I will take one more. Smile. Thank you very much. So let's start then.
Okay. So
I'm going to introduce you first, and then you can, because the people who are here don't know you yet. Not everybody. And remember, this is being recorded, and we will be sharing it. So the people who are maybe not here are going to see you later once they see the recording. Yeah, maybe in a week time, etc. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming back and joining us again. We would like to apologize because the chat is unfortunately unavailable at the moment. We promise we will fix it for tomorrow. Just remember that each presentation takes approximately 20 minutes, and there are always 10 minutes at the end for questions. So if you have any questions, please just raise your hand at the end, turn your mic on, and feel free to ask. So let me welcome and introduce the first group of speakers. Maria Ignacia Bravo, Lisette Becerra, Javiera Bustamante, and Sofia Capitan. The title of the presentation is EFL Pre-Service Teachers' Perceptions Towards the Impact of a Critical Discourse Analysis module on their pedagogical practices, as you can see on your screens right now. Lisette Becerra Valenzuela has a BA in Education and English Pedagogy from the Catholic University of the Maule. Her research interests are second language acquisition. Javiera Bustamante Rodriguez completed her BA in Education and English Pedagogy at the Catholic University of the Maule. Her research interests are critical thinking, critical discourse analysis, and second language teaching and learning. Maria Ignacia Bravo Chacon earned a BA. Sorry, you will probably earn it next year. I think I made a mistake here. Is it correct, Nacha? This is next year for you. Sorry about that. In Education and English Pedagogy from the Catholic University of the Maule. And her research interests are second language acquisition, critical thinking, and second language teaching. Sofia Capitan Diaz holds a BA in Education and English Pedagogy from the Catholic University of the Maule. Her research interests are second language acquisition, critical thinking, and social emotional learning. So good luck, ladies. We are here to listen to you carefully.
thank you very much. Well, first of all, good afternoon, members of the audience. We shall now begin with the presentation by thanking you for attending. The title of our thesis project, as Ms. Charca said, is EFL Pre-Service Teachers' Perceptions Toward a Critical Discourse Analysis Module and its impact on their pedagogical practices. This is my research team. As you can see in the slide, the presentation is divided into 5 main parts so you can deeply understand our research. Let's start with the introduction of the study. Javiera will start talking about the reason behind the selection of this topic.
Thank you, Maria Ignacia. So first, as students, we have been encouraged to develop a new set of skills, including critical thinking. In order to implement those skills, CDA, critical discourse analysis practice, and enable pre-service teachers to develop their critical thinking skills, and it acknowledges the importance of promoting these competences into their teaching habits.
Okay. However, in a study conducted by Martin in 2016, among Chilean universities that impart ELT programs, it was concluded that 56% of the curriculums included in the research do not present literal training on critical thinking skills, nor how to develop them in future practices. In that sense, EFL pre-service teachers' lack of preparation regarding their critical thinking abilities in the classroom is directly tied to their positive attitude towards implementing these competencies, as were Burton and Turf mentioned in 2005. cited by Vitek and Badir in 2015.
On that same note, as Norma Ferkla mentioned in 2018, CDA aims to equip EFL learners with critical thinking and also language skills. Moreover, in 2015, Amari stated that educational and learning systems must bring CDA into play in order to promote learners' capacities to question, reflect on, and also change the world. This will be helpful not only for their roles as future teachers, but also as their lives as active members of our society.
Moving on to the next part, we can see the hypotheses of the study that were created to answer the research question, which were: Hypothesis 1. Students of the 7th semester from an ELT training program perceive the critical discourse analysis module as a beneficial course for their pedagogical practices. Hypothesis 0. Students of the 7th semester from an ELT training program do not perceive the critical discourse analysis module as a beneficial core for their pedagogical practices.
Then the research question of our study is: what are the perception of EFL pre-service teachers towards the impact of a critical discourse analysis module on their pedagogical practices?
And the general objective that we established is to determine EFL pre-service teachers' perceptions about the impact a critical discourse analysis module has on the pedagogical practices.
For the specific objectives, the research team aimed to first identify the general perceptions that EFL pre-service teachers have towards critical discourse analysis. Secondly, to describe the perceptions that EFL pre-service teachers have towards the impact of a critical discourse analysis model on their pedagogical practices. And finally, to demonstrate the influence a critical discourse analysis model has on EFL pre-service teachers' pedagogical practices.
Following the presentation of the research, we will present the theoretical framework. First, it is essential to address what we mean by ELT, which according to Howard and Smith in 2014, is characterized as being a form of language that teaching utilizes English as a communicative tool in sociocultural backgrounds where foreign languages are spoken.
And when it comes to ELT in the Chilean context, CLT is the most predominant approach, and according to the Ministry of Education in 2014, it can be applied with other approaches. Additionally, it is stated that educators should aim to develop the 4 communicative skills, although no emphasis is given to the development of critical thinking.
Following that same idea, Jeffrey quoted in 2014 that teaching the students to become critical thinkers does not mean simply equipping them with certain intellectual tools, but it involves their personal transformation and how that impacts on the quality of their lives and those around them, which showcases the relevance that critical thinking has in learning processes.
Critical discourse analysis, or CDA, emerged as a discipline in which, according to Van Dijk in 2015, pieces of discourse are analyzed, while their characteristics also can be examined in different sociocultural contexts. For that reason, as Amari stated in 2015, this discipline helps to encourage students towards independent learning by using higher order thinking skills, which are vital for lifelong education.
When it comes to the implementation of CDA in the EFL classroom, according to Randolph and Johnson in 2017, students feel more engaged towards learning about the world. Likewise, as Harman et al. Stated in 2016, CDA in the EFL classroom provide a new set of methods for teachers and students to improve motivation and ensure effectiveness in training their language and critical thinking skills.
And finally, as Karina said in 2014, becoming a teacher involves the exploration of attitudes, beliefs, feelings, and personality in order to recognize the best practice style. With the purpose of fulfilling this, Guts in 2006 established that CDA becomes a great opportunity for teachers to create an EFL learning environment closer to how language is used in the real world.
Now we step onto the methodological framework, and we're going to explain to you some of the details of the methodology that we used in our project. To begin with, the study followed a quantitative approach in order to get data information from an instrument that was later on adapted by us, the research team. And the design of the study showcases a non-experimental correlational method. This research specifically was conducted in an English language teaching program from a university located in the Maule region. And the participants were 38 pre-service teachers because they were the last group of pre-service teachers that attended the Analysis Critical Discourse module.
For the development of this study, 4 different data collection instruments were taken and adapted by the research team. 2 of them were Likert scales regarding critical thinking and CDA, and the other 2 instruments were questionnaires from which we retrieved 6 open-ended questions in total.
Moving on to the next point, the information gathered by the research team was analyzed using 2 types of quantitative analysis. The results obtained from the critical thinking Likert scale part were subdivided into 3 main dimensions, whereas the result from the critical discourse analysis Likert scale part were divided into 2 dimensions only.
And regarding the open-ended questions section, the responses were categorized according to what they established in each question. And as you can see in the presentation, the answers from the critical thinking open-ended question part were categorized in 3 main dimensions, and the answers retrieved from the critical discourse analysis open-ended question part were categorized in other 3 different main dimensions as well. And the results were analyzed using the statistical package for social sciences program.
And all of that being said, the results of the study are the following. First, in the participants' perceptions and attitudes about critical thinking dimension, 92.1% of the participants believed that thinking critically is particularly important in teaching, as it was the most strongly agreed statement, whereas 2.6% of them strongly disagreed with the statement 20.
Moving to the second dimension called participants' perceptions on the development of the critical thinking skills, more than half of our participants believed that they will achieve a higher success if they think critically, which is strongly connected to the least agreed statement, which is number 10.
In the third dimension, promotion of critical thinking in the participants' pedagogical practices, the most agreed statement was number 9. You cannot plan a lesson without critical thinking skills, with only 28.9%, while the least agreed statement was number 12, with only 10.9% of the preferences.
And following the second part related to the critical thinking open-ended questions, the most significant result was obtaining the critical thinking implementation dimension, in which 92.1% of the participants declared that they would be able to implement critical thinking in their future teaching practices.
Now, concerning the critical discourse analysis Likert scale, the results are the following. First, in the CDA teachers' practice dimension, the pre-service teachers highly agreed with the statement number 2, which declares that teachers have to research the validity of the context of the textbooks. And on the contrary, the participants showed the lowest tendency in statement 1, that says that teachers have to research the authors of the textbooks they used in class, with 52.6%, which is still more than half of the responses.
When it comes to learners' critical thinking development, the participants strongly believed that that teachers have to encourage learners to not necessarily agree with the contents of the textbooks, whereas only 21.1% demonstrated that an agreement on teachers having to encourage learners to discuss the news with their classmates.
The results from the CDA open-ended questions, first and second category obtained similar percentages, around 70% of impact and relevance, while the most significant result from the third category, in which 92.1% of the participants declare having a positive attitude towards CDA instruction implementation in ELT.
And now the correlation ranges will be presented. And regarding the correlations results, in the first one, the pre-service teachers consider that there is a correspondence among CDA implementation, critical thinking, and their pedagogical practices. However, the connection is not considered as essential, as it obtains only a general weak positive correlation. And regarding the second correlation, as you can see in the table, the most highlighted result was among critical thinking implications and CDA instruction implementation in ELT dimensions, which showed a perfect positive correlation. That means that pre-service teachers believe that the implementation of CDA instruction in ELT equips them with the required tools to apply critical thinking in the current and future classes.
Now we move on to the discussion section of our project. And first, the critical thinking Likert scale discussion. Dimension number 1, titled Participants' Perceptions and Attitudes about Critical Thinking. It was revealed that the participants have a positive perception about critical thinking since they strongly agreed with the relevance of its role in ELT. And this is related to what some authors like Stefanova, Bobkina, and Sanchez-Verdejo stated about students internalizing EFL acknowledgements in order to enhance the connection between English and their own culture. And as a result, the participants are more likely to have developed critical thinking abilities. However, in statement 20, the participants showed an unclear preference since, as Starnovic and West in 2000 support, critical thinking is more about identifying that information cannot be generally trusted.
In the second dimension, participants' perceptions about the development of their critical thinking skills, the results reveal that overall the participants showed a confidence in developing their critical thinking abilities while reading, which supports the belief that critical thinking skills and reading comprehension foster each other, as Silalahi in 2017 stated. However, in statement 10, the answers drive us to reflect on Tafiz's claims from 2014 that critical thinking abilities need constant practice, leading us to believe that although the participants have a great confidence in critical thinking, they might not integrate them in daily life situations.
As for the third dimension, promotion of critical thinking in their pedagogical practices, the participants express a positive attitude toward implementing critical thinking in their future lessons, showcasing that, as Murawski stated in 2014, students that become active critical thinking learners will eventually enhance the promotion of those skills. Additionally, this is also supported by what Gomez and Rodriguez has established in 2018, by stating that EFL teachers must include critical thinking techniques so as to cultivate students' higher order skills.
And now we're moving into the dimensions from the critical thinking open-ended questions. The first dimension was the role of critical thinking in the classroom. And here the participants declared the role of critical thinking as relevant and defined it as crucial in everyone's development, both as a person and academically speaking. This has a strong connection to what McCormick, Clark, and Rains established in 2015, since the enhancement of critical thinking skills provides students with the necessary tools for both achieving academic success and influencing their personal development.
In the second dimension, titled Teachers as Encouragement, the participants display a strong trend towards believing that critical thinking is a competence that they should develop in their current and their future pedagogical practices. And moreover, this is linked to what Warburton and Torf said in 2005, and they were also, afterwards cited in Petek and Bedir in 2015, which connects the use of critical thinking abilities in the classroom with the positive attitudes that the teachers have towards them in order to impart them in their classes.
Lastly, in the critical thinking implementation dimension, the majority of the participants manifested that they consider critical thinking as applicable in their teaching practices, while they also feel confident in their ability to implement critical thinking effectively during their lessons. These ideas connect directly to what Kaviani and Mashadi proposed in 2020, supporting the belief that promoting productive skills in the EFL classroom helps internalize critical thinking in the students.
Moving on to the critical discourse analysis Likert scale discussion. The next dimension is CTA teachers' practices. Oh my God. that we have. The vast majority of the participants perceive statements in this section as not of worth, showing the preference toward the importance of further research regarding the information in material used in classes, connecting with Samarinska's point of view in 2017, since he emphasizes the need of evaluating how textbooks influence students' attitudes and beliefs. Additionally, in statements 7 and 18, the participants consider critical discussions about current topic in educational settings as positive. Said matter can be linked to what Ramihi and Shafarifi stated in 2015, elucidated that the emphasis of CTA in the promotion of reflection in controversial issues.
And when it comes to learners' critical thinking development, the participants' results in each statement are predominantly high. For instance, statements 4 and 17 are connected by a strong relationship with the use of textbooks when applying CTA in the EFL classroom, as it is one of the main tools employed by teachers, and this aligns with Jumaya in 2016, since EFL textbooks have been modified throughout the years, now including social issues such as sexism, meritocracy, male supremacy, among others. Additionally, the participants also show promptness towards the relevance of fear and self-correction and reflection through a critical lens into their CDA assignments. This connects with the ideas of Stanovic and West in 2000, which state that reflection is a key characteristic of critical thinking development.
And finally, the critical discourse analysis open-ended question part of the discussion. In the first dimension, called CTA Modules' Impact, the participants considered that after being part of the CTA module, their opinions about ELT changed. For example, student 36 agrees with Martin in 2017 by emphasizing that through CTA implementation, critical capacities and tools for future practices are developed during this type of courses. Also, these results connect with the answers from the CTA teacher practices dimension, as after attending the module, students demonstrated to have developed critical awareness, which according to Hamadin in 2015, helps to reflect how language is used and also manipulated.
In the matter of CDA principles and its influence on ELT dimension, there is a tendency to consider CDA and ELT as an important phenomenon. So in this case, Martin in 2017 agrees, since he establishes that the EFL classroom should allow critical thinking development through a CDA because it gives the opportunity to analyze in depth. Moreover, the claims of Lin in 2014, also related to the previous results, consider CDA as an important approach that can be applied not only in educational matters, but in different contexts of life.
The last dimension is CTA instruction implementation in ELT, where the majority of the participants stated that they would recommend CTA instructions. Answers such the one provided by the student 36 in the slide display an understanding of the importance of using material that promote critical thinking through CDA. Agreeing with what Fairclough established in 1992, who highlighted the relevance of including social aspects in language teaching materials. According to Amari 2015, when teachers have these aspects in mind, they can enforce students' capacities to analyze discourse, increasing their communicative abilities and help them develop their critical thinking skills.
And now we'll let you know our final thoughts. Then from this study, we have concluded that a CDA module makes positive contributions to our field of study, that is English language teaching, and due to the results shown in this piece of research, where an eminent positive impact was shown.
As this research included correlations, this has given us a broader understanding of the relationship that the two main variables of this study have. And those main variables were the perceptions that EFL pre-service teachers had on the CDA module and the impact that it had on their pedagogical practices. Even though the results from the first correlation demonstrated that CDA had a slight impact on the participants' perceptions regarding their critical thinking skills and the corresponding application, the open-ended section of the study revealed that the pre-service teachers are interested in implementing CDA principles in their pedagogical practices, which shows the positive impact that the module in itself had on their perspective about teaching and learning English, shaping them as future teachers.
Following the same idea, almost all of the participants declare CDA instruction as an essential pillar to ELT, since it enhances a set of positive implications, such as the capability to analyze discourses, improve the communicative ability, and the students' capacity to reflect on their learning and social cultural setting.
Hence, through the analysis of the gathered data, we have come to an instance in which hypothesis 1 of the study is accepted. Therefore, students from the 7th semester from an ELT program in a university of the Maule region perceive the CTA module as a beneficial course for their pedagogical practices. Here we have the reference used in this slide. And well, members of the audience, this is the end of our presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any question, we are glad to answer them.
Are there any questions? Anybody?
We are very glad you understand everything.
Hopefully you means that you got it, yeah.
Maybe I can ask you a question. I was wondering what made you investigate this topic in particular? How did you come up with this? How did you come up with this idea of investigating this particular course?
So,
Okay.
I think Sophia wants to start. Sophia, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, as a matter of fact, the CDA module specifically for us, the Analysis Crítico del Discurso module for us, was really, really impactful in the way that we viewed not only our own way of teaching English and making critical thinking a vital part of our lessons, but also just in the way that we could actually implement critical thinking in our own daily lives. And because of that, and because of conversations that we would have with our own classmates, and seeing that most of them agreed with that same idea, we're like, okay, then let's investigate that. Let's see if it actually has some sort of impact on the way that we continue to design our lessons, to do our teaching, basically. And apparently because of the results that we had, the module in itself, before it, we do have an idea of how important critical thinking is, but after it becomes a very important part of every single lesson thing.
and also following the same line of thought of Sophie was explaining, we have come to an instance where we realize that the new curriculum of this program, of the English language teaching program of the University of Maule, do not have specifically discourse, like critical discourse analysis. It might have changed the name, but it does not have the same name, Análisis Crítico del Discurso. So as these students that we implement our research was the last set of students that had Análisis Crítico del Discurso, we wanted to know how they feel, how do they think about Análisis Crítico del Discurso, and if it had any impact on them. So as you can see in the presented research, it had an impact on them. And so yes, that is mainly the reason, because we know that it's not there anymore, and we wanted to show what CDA does for our program.
Thank you.
No more questions? We hope you enjoy our research and it was helpful for you all.
Thank you very much for your presentation, ladies. Shall we continue with the next speaker, or shall I wait for a little bit because the presentation is supposed to start at 3:05?
I think we can have some minutes
Okay.
before we start, just to give some time to, I think, Fernanda prepare herself. Yeah.
Yes, I'm here.
I'm going to introduce you maybe in like 2 minutes. Let's wait for a little bit.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Let's start with the second one. Okay. Good afternoon, Fernanda. Good afternoon, everybody. All pre- and in-service teachers, educators, researchers, everybody who is here. Let me introduce our second speaker, Fernanda Fuentes. Her presentation is called Characterizing Students' Participation and Use of Learning Strategies in a Virtual EFL Context, an Action Research Study. Fernanda Fuentes is a fifth-year student of the English Pedagogy at the University of O'Higgins, based in Rancagua in Chile. Currently, she is working on her action research project, which studies the extent to which motivation towards L2 learning relates to the use of L2 learning strategies in the virtual EFL classroom. In 2020, she received her bachelor's degree in education, which encouraged her to keep practicing and improving her skills as an EFL teacher. Fernanda is currently part of the class of seminar, and she's interested in contributing to the field of second language acquisition by researching on motivation, attitudes, the use of L2 learning strategies, sociocultural theory, identity, and applied linguistics in EFL teaching, among others. So let's welcome Fernanda. You can start.
Thank you so much for that introduction. So I'm going to share my screen so that you can see my presentation. Okay, can you see my presentation? Yes? Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
Perfect. Great to know. So yes, just for you to know, last Friday I graduated from university. So right now the first time I'm presenting officially as a teacher. So yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, my name is Fernanda Fuentes, and today I'm going to be presenting my action research study, which is called Characterizing Students' Participation Operationalized as Level of Engagement, that is motivation, and the use of L2 learning strategies in a virtual EFL context, an action research study. My supervisor teacher was Marcos Cárdenas from Universidad de O'Higgins too. The agenda for today is the following. First, we're going to start by introducing the study. We will describe the location, the participants, and the school, of course. Also the modality in which they were learning the L2. Then we will move on to the problem. We will explain briefly how this problem and what it emerged from. Okay, so we will describe a little bit about that. Number 3, we will describe the research question and the objective that I stated in order to answer that question. Number 4, we will describe the methods. Number 5, the descriptive results and their respective discussions. And finally, of course, the conclusions. First of all, the introduction of the study. The location in which I carried out this project was in Rancagua, Chile. The school, it was a high school, and it was a public high school here in Rancagua. Regarding the participants, they were 35 female students. And in this case, I wrote female because this high school teaches only female students, non-binary students, and also transgender students. Interestingly, my class, the class that I was working with, was composed of 35 female students only. They were 9th graders and their level of L2 proficiency was intermediate. This was based on the following fact. The students were able to describe concepts, to complete sentences and create sentences. However, they were not able to follow a complete... Professor Catherine Kim, you have the mic on.
I have.
Sorry, I was so proud of you that I was just like, excited.
Good to know that you're here. Okay. Their level of proficiency, as I was mentioned, they were not able to follow a complete lesson in English. Okay, so that's why they had this level of L2 proficiency as intermediate. And the learning modality was online, 100% online. Now the statement of the problem. So I already mentioned that the students were learning online, right? But how do these students learn the L2? So this is what I'm going to explain now. These students learn English through cycles. Each cycle lasts 3 weeks, okay? And each week includes 2 60-minute sessions, okay? And throughout all this cycle, each cycle, the students work on a 10, even more pages long material that includes L2 writing tasks. So what happened? By the end of the cycle, students have the opportunity to send the material, the completed material, of course, so that the students are able to receive feedback from the teacher and also, by the beginning of the year, get an extra point that was going to be added to the final score of each quiz. Okay, so what was the problem? The problem that I could identify is the following. Students were not engaged in L2 writing tasks. Therefore, the students were not sending the material. So I wanted to research on this. The main reasons why the students were not sending the material. So my first hypothesis was that the students maybe didn't know how to work on the material. Maybe they lacked knowledge of the use of L2 learning strategies. And my research question was the following. Is there a relationship between the students' motivation toward the L2 learning and the use of L2 learning strategies in a virtual EFL classroom? And to answer this question, I stated the following general objective. We were going to explore the extent to which the use of L2 learning strategies relates to motivation. Okay, so first of all, my motivations. One of the reasons why I decided to research on this topic was related to the novelty of the topic. Several authors such as Gardner 1985, Ellis 1985, and Dornje and Otto 1998 have established the relationship between attitudes and motivation. However, the relationship between motivation and the use of L2 learning strategies has not been completely clarified yet. So the methods, the data collection instruments. So I implemented 3 different instruments. The first one was the semi-structured focus group interview, and I'm going to cite Tell Me 2010. Secondly, I implemented a questionnaire based, which represents an adaptation of the attitude motivation test battery report provided by Gardner 1985. And finally, the observation forms. I implemented 4 different observation forms per class. Now the data analysis. From these different instruments that I could implement, I gathered both types of data, qualitative and quantitative data. So for the qualitative data, I used the coding technique provided by Burns 2010. The author provided 5 different steps in order to interpret the data and to analyze them, which are assembling the data, coding the data, comparing them, building meanings and interpretations, also reporting the outcomes. And finally, for the quantitative data, I based all this information and I transformed them into graphics. Now we're going to move on to the results. First, as I already mentioned, I was going to be researching on motivation and language learning strategies. So the first result related to variable A, which is motivation, is the following. Students feel both extrinsically and intrinsically motivated. And I'm going to explain this later. Result related to variable number 2, L2 learning strategies. The students make use of L2 learning strategies. And result number 3 related to the relationship between the 2 different constructs. Task planning and time management are the 2 emerging themes related to low level of engagement in the L2 writing tasks. So, related to the first result, which is motivation. First of all, we need to understand what motivation is. So, Ortega 2010 mentions that motivation represents a cognitive factor, cognitive from behavior, that influence or affect the way students learn the L2 by making him or her fail, whether fail or succeed, as we know. So, different authors, Desi and Ryan, 1985, Knowles, Pelletier, Clement, and Valorant, 2000, Ortega, 2010, and Ellis, 2015, have made the distinction between extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation. In the case of extrinsic motivation, the authors mention that it refers to feeling motivated because of external factors, such as getting a high grade or getting something in return. So, I decided to add 2 different quotes related to extrinsic motivation. So, from the focus group interview, student number 1 and student number 5. Student number 1 always send the material. Student number 5 usually sends the material. So, the first one says, siempre la envío, Miss, porque para estar al día. Así no tengo que estar haciendo tareas a las 11 de la noche. Right. And number 2, yo dejé de enviarla porque parece que daban un punto para la prueba. So this represents that the students are getting something in return in order to send the material. Number one, if I send the material, I'm going to have free time at midnight. Number two, if I receive an extra point, I'm going to send the material. So this is extrinsic motivation. Related to intrinsic motivation, the same authors mentioned that intrinsic motivation refers to feeling motivated because of high levels of interest and curiosity. So here, I decided to add two different graphics related to a Likert scale, and I'm going to cite Likert 1932. This was part of the questionnaire, the Attitude Battery Report. So the first graphic represents statement number 8. Deseo conocer más sobre el inglés. Most of the students strongly agreed with this statement. This represents that the students want to learn more about the language, the second language. And also statement number 14, which says the following. Me gustaría aprender sobre países de habla inglesa, such as the USA, England, Australia. So most of the students selected that they showed that they strongly agreed or agree with the statement. So this represents that the students wanted to learn also about different cultures related to the L2. So this was intrinsic motivation. Now related to the second result, that mentioned that the students make use of L2 learning strategies. So here I decided to add 3 different quotes related to the use of L2 learning strategies. So the first one says the following, which was part of the observation forums. 11 out of 11 students use L2 learning strategies when working on the L2 study material. Most of them highlight words, vocabulary. The rest uses colors and translates. Number 2, the 6 students who work online are highlighting the same words that the teacher highlights. And number 3, 7 out of 7, only 7 students were working on the material. Most of them were highlighting words, underlying, paraphrasing along with the teacher. For this discussion, we draw on the concept of scaffolding provided by Wood, Bronner, and Ross, 1976. Vygotsky mainly, and also Lantov, 2015. So they mentioned that scaffolding represents learning but by receiving guidance from the teacher. So here represents that the students were using L2 learning strategies because they were receiving all this input provided by the teacher. Once they understood and learned all these strategies, they were able to apply them on their own by themselves. So this represents that the students were using L2 learning strategies. Related to the result number 3, related to the relationship between the 2 different variables. So I decided to add 3 different quotes related to that express the reasons why the students were not sending the material. So student number 7 from the focus group interview. Yo no la envío porque la verdad se me olvida enviarlo. Number 2, this was from the questionnaire, porque a veces se me olvida terminarlas. This was an open-ended question. And finally, students answered from the questionnaire 2, no me acuerdo. Believe me, I received about 10 different answers related to the same topic. This represents that the students are having problems with time management and also task planning. This reminded me the concept of self-regulation provided by Vygotsky, 1978, Oxford, Lantham, and Turn and Powner. So they mention that self-regulation refers to the ability that learners have to control their own learning. Therefore, there are different processes that the students have to do in order to control the learning. Analyzing, evaluating, discussing too. Therefore, the students were not planning their learning. After that, the authors Chung and Erdmer, 2000, provided 3 different strategies that are also part of this process of self-regulation, which are goal setting, organizing, and time management. This was highly important because most of the students were not having time, were maybe dealing with some problems related to planning and scheduling all the different tasks that they were doing during the day. Therefore, they were not able to self-control their learning processes. Thus, they were not sending the material. The conclusions of my study are the following. First, students feel both extrinsically and intrinsically motivated. Number 2, students make use of L2 learning strategies. Number 3, scaffolding plays an important role in the students' L2 learning strategies choice. And number 4, there is a slightly significant relationship between motivation and the use of learning strategies in a virtual EFL classroom. Now, some of the limitations and future research of my study are the following. The number 1 is time constraints. I was not able, for example, to develop maybe different stages of my action research because of time. Number 2, number of participants. Most of the students are not used to checking their emails. Therefore, they were not sending the assent and consent letters. And for future research, maybe it would be interesting to also research on parents' attitudes and motivation toward the L2 learning. According to Gardner, 1968, it is important to consider also their parents' attitudes when researching on students' attitudes and motivations. Number 2, L2 learning material and different skills development. As I already mentioned, the material in which they were working on was based mainly on L2 learning, L2 writing tasks. Therefore, maybe that was also a factor. Maybe developing or designing a material that includes listening activities and also reading activities, it would have been better. And number 3, researching on getting the extra point. That was highly interesting and crucial for the development of future research related to the relationship between motivation and the use of L2 learning strategies. Thank you so much for your attention. And these are my references, and I'm willing to ask any question that you ask.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Professor Sumante, please go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation. It is something very interesting. I would like to ask about what you said about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. According to your work, the research you developed or you presented here, what do you think about both type of motivations? Is one more important than the other? Or both of them are important? You have to work with both of them. What do you discover about that?
Yes, thank you so much for your question. Yes, I personally consider that extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation are both important in an EFL classroom. Extrinsic motivation because most of the students want to receive something back, for example, getting a high grade. They want to get a high grade as every student in the world, right? On the other hand, we have intrinsic motivation. For me, it's really important to consider students' interests when I'm designing my lessons. Therefore, it is crucial to know that our students are going to be intrinsically motivated, because if they are not able to represent or to feel, sorry, that was my dog, or to feel and show their interests, it is going to be difficult. It is going to be difficult to develop a good quality lesson.
Thanks. Don't worry.
Thank you for your question.
We have one more question from Ranjiva. Ranjiva, would you like to ask?
Yeah, thank you, Charka. It's kind of a comment and also a question, because finally it comes in the shape of a question. I was going through the presentation, and finally I can see the references here also. 1, 2, 3, 4 references of Oxford. Rebecca Oxford is there, but nowhere you mentioned about the theoretical framework under which this learning strategies, which Oxford has proposed in her articles. This is just a comment. Now, going back to your presentation, you mentioned learning strategies from the point of view of scaffolding of Vygotsky. But don't scaffolding from the teacher side, like teachers support and then the students use their learning strategies. What about those strategies which the students discover themselves, number one? Or what about those strategies which are part of their cognition and metacognition? I mean, in a way that suppose I feel myself, if I do a particular activity, I can remember this particular thing in a better way. Or if I write in a green color, no, I don't know, green color pen, I can do it better. Now, these activities are not being told by the teacher. These are discovered by the learner themselves, which are part of not scaffolding, but other framework. I mean, other no parts, other types of learning strategies. So I was wondering whether these type of strategies, whether part of your research, or it didn't come out in the data. If you can say something about that.
Thank you so much for that information. Yes, I was not able to research on the different learning strategies that the students were identifying by themselves. However, it would be highly interesting to recognize them in the future, right? But when I was developing my action research project, I was thinking about the zone of proximal development, right? So once the students learn a strategy, for example, the students are able to identify different steps to follow in order to apply these language learning strategies. Once they learn about this, the students are able to apply them by themselves. And here in this step and in this stage, students are able to also design different strategies to make the connection between the strategy that they learned and also with the strategy that they were going to use in the future. So yes, of course, there are going to be different strategies that they will design by themselves, but it will be highly interesting to research on that in the future. Yes.
We have one more question from Marcos. Thank you very much for the answer. Marcos, would you like to ask as well?
Sure. Hello there. It was very, very interesting before my question, and according to what you have said during the beginning of your presentation, something that I have noticed is that they do not, like, the learners do not continue with the learning strategies, right? So they couldn't cope, like, in a long time process. And by any chance, did you use a particular lesson plan according to the learning strategies?
No, I couldn't design any. I mean, I was working with that class. However, I designed a lesson related to the unit and the things that I was going to be teaching. However, I was not able to design like an improvement proposal in order to research more on the students and how the students are using these LT learning strategies. But yes, I'm considering this for the future. Yes.
I see. Yes. Because it's like as the other guest was mentioning, on the reference there is a lot of Oxford, right? And Chamot, who is a person that also research a lot in this particular topic, she has a proposal within a lesson plan. And the lesson plan that Chamot proposes is regarding not only the use a learning strategies, but also perpetuating that lesson strategy during time. So I was wondering if you could have that, but it is very interesting. Well done, well done. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much. Yes. And also because Rebecca Oxford provided different types of learning strategies. Not only, I don't know, we have, I have them here, metacognitive, memory related, compensatory, effective, and social studies. So yes, I would love to design a lesson in order to also research on those types of LT learning strategies. Thank you.
Thank you for the question and the answer. Anybody else has a question? I might ask as well. I focused on the part of writing. You mentioned that the students struggle with writing often, which we know. I have the same problem in my classes. So how do you as a teacher tackle this, or how do you help your students with writing? I mean, you said we can focus on the interests, obviously that's one part, but do you have any other tips for the teachers maybe, because there are plenty of teachers here?
Yes, in my case, when I'm teaching writing skills, I always ask the students to provide or to develop an outline, always. I consider that, yes, I consider that designing an outline facilitates a lot all our productive skill. Therefore, if I'm teaching the students how to develop an essay, for example, I always ask the students, okay, organize your idea. It's not about just writing. You have to organize always everything that you write. Identify the main ideas, and after that, I don't know, start developing all your topic. But first of all, it's important to always develop an outline. Even though it's just a simple paragraph, it is also important to outline everything. So yes, that's my main strategy.
I'll add something to this in the outline. I give them plus, plus, minus, or minus, minus, plus, and I tell them which one is the positive and negative side, like which one is the argument. So you have to like organize, but I do exactly the same. So perfect. Thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you. Any more questions? We have approximately 1 or 2 minutes. See, I think there are no more questions. We are supposed to start at 3:40. It is, we could take a 5-minute break. That's also good, so that the people, you know, refresh themselves, go to the bathroom, etc. So shall we disconnect, or shall we just switch off our cameras? We can just switch off the cameras, correct?
Yeah, we can stay here, switch off the cameras, and then be back in 5 minutes.
Super.
Thank you.
On my clock, it is 3:33, so I'll give you 7 minutes exactly. It's my time here, so. But just come back as you know when you are supposed, or when the next presentation is supposed to take place, which is going to be at 3:40. Okay, so take a 5-minute break. Thank you very much, Fernanda.
Thank you. Thank you.
So see you in 5 minutes.
Thank you, Shaka.
I'll wait approximately 1 minute just for everybody to be back from their break. I don't know about you, but I very much like the variety we have this year. We have very different topics, which is excellent because every single presentation, you know, gives us some other insight. So let's start. I don't know if Sarah is here, around, somewhere in the virtual space. Super. So I'm going to introduce Sarah, and then again the same 20 minutes presentation and 10 minutes of questions at the end. Okie dokie. So let me introduce our third speaker, Sarah Kare. The title of her presentation is the following: Female Animal Characters in Roald Dahl's Children's Books, a Misogynistic Portrayal. After obtaining her bachelor's degree in Spanish and Latin American Studies in Besançon, France, and Valencia, Spain in 2016, she moved to Prague, Czech Republic, where she taught French, English, and Spanish in primary and secondary schools, as well as in language institutes for adults. She now holds a master's degree in specialized translation from the University of Córdoba in Spain and a master's degree in English studies from the University of Jaén in Spain. She has been living in Chile since 2019 and is currently a PhD student in the Department of Languages and Cultures at the University of Jaén. So welcome, Sarah. You can start, please. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Let's see if I can share without any problem.
We can hear you a little bit low. The volume. Try one more time, sharing and speaking.
Is it fine here? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, now it's better.
Let's try again. Here. So can you see it? Well, I don't see anyone, so if you are making faces, I won't see it.
No, that's okay, we can see.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me and thank you for being here. My name is Sarah Kare, and today my presentation is entitled Female Animal Characters in Roald Dahl's Children's Books, a Misogynistic Portrayal. This was my master's thesis, written under the supervision of Dr. Milagros López Peláez Casellas, which I defended at the University of Jaén in September 2021. The aim of my thesis here was to adopt a feminist approach to critically read 4 of Roald Dahl's children's books and to analyze to which extent he and his illustrator, Quentin Blake, portray female animal characters in a misogynistic way. To do so, my presentation has 4 parts. The first one focuses on gender stereotypes in children's literature. The second one is about feminism and feminist literary criticism. The third part provides elements of Roald Dahl's life and work. And the final part is the analysis of the misogynistic portrayal of female animal characters in a corpus of 4 of Roald Dahl's books. I would like to start with a quote from the 1972 Trailblazer study in gender stereotypes in children's books conducted by Weitzman and her team. Children's books reflect cultural values and are an important instrument for persuading children to accept those values. They also contain role prescriptions which encourage the child to conform to acceptable standards of behavior. So as you can see, the most noteworthy elements are underlined by me, so I added the underlining. We can see that children's books can be used as a tool to teach children, or rather even instill in them, which behaviors are or are not acceptable or suitable in a given society. And this is particularly true when it comes to gender roles and gender performativity. Children's literature was for many years considered an inferior genre, but it is now being academically studied because it is undeniable that children's books truly shape the understanding of the world for younger readers. And it is also used, for example, in the English teaching context for beginners in English. And this is why children's literature can potentially be dangerous, with the quote I read earlier, because you can teach anything with children's literature. And this is especially true when it comes to gender stereotypes in children's literature. So in 1972, Weizmann and her team found out that in children's books, female characters were invisible in the text, in the storyline, and in the titles. They were outnumbered by their male counterparts. They were inactive and homebound, and they had very limited roles. Two major studies in 1990 and 2006 demonstrated that this misrepresentation, this misogynistic representation, has catastrophic consequences on the cognitive understanding and development of young readers, and it also heavily influences their adulthood. More recent studies have shown that there is an evolution. So today, for example, parents and educators are more aware of these gender stereotypes in children's literature. However, children's literature still represents female characters mainly as inferior. Now, we don't have enough time here to talk about feminism at length, but broadly speaking, feminism, there is some proto-thought of feminism in the Middle Ages, but it wasn't fully and completely theorized before the 18th, 19th century, especially in Europe and in the USA. The three main goals of feminism are to end the oppression of women, to fight the patriarchy, which socially, financially, and politically favors men, and to establish a gender-fair world. There is a huge controversy around feminism because for many years it was essentially a feminism for white, straight, and middle-class women. But it has, and especially from the USA, from Europe as well. But now, well, recently, it has been more inclusive, it's broader, and it includes all the voices with a lot of subgroups, which is why we can talk about feminisms in plural, with, for example, ecofeminism, third world feminism, queer feminism, male feminism even. So it is much more inclusive and also intersectional. Feminism is commonly divided into waves of feminism. So waves because of the tidal movement of the waves coming and going through the years, but we should consider each wave as the waves are mutually nurturing each other. So the first wave from late 18th century or mid 19th century to mid 20th century was focused on vote and political engagement for women. The second wave from the late 60s to the mid 80s focused on sex segregation at work, in finances, and in health, for example, with an emphasis on pregnancy and reproductive rights. The third wave from the mid 80s to mid 90s was fighting for more inclusive, to be more inclusive, more intersectional. And this is when actually we saw the blooming of all these subgroups of feminism. And finally, there is debate over the existence of a fourth wave, which started in 2010, which is more online feminism with social media, the use of hashtags, the Me Too movements, the rape culture, etc. Feminist literary criticism is the application of feminism into literature. So as I mentioned, we had some proto-thought in the Middle Ages, but the founders were Mary Wollstonecraft in the 18th century, and then Virginia Woolf and Simone de Beauvoir in the early and mid 20th century. The goals of feminist literary criticism is to reread male writing in order to analyze and criticize the misrepresentation of the feminine in fiction, and in order to question male authority or androcentrism. Other goals could be also to reread or rediscover marginalized female author, and to offer a more adequate representation of female characters. And obviously, feminist literary criticism has evolved in parallel with feminism. So this is why we have a lot of different groups, subgroups, according to the different groups in feminism. Now moving on to Roald Dahl. He was born in 1916 in Wales in a Norwegian family, and he spent miserable years at school where he was bullied and he was considered a bad student. In 1934, he started working for the Shell Petroleum Company, who sent him to Kenya in 1936, where he decided to enroll as a pilot for in the Royal Air Force at the beginning of the Second World War in 1939. And after an almost fatal plane accident, which almost killed him, he was sent to Washington to work at the British Embassy. And this is there in the United States where he published his very first story, The Gremlins, in 1943. We should mention that it was almost adapted into a movie by Walt Disney, but actually Roald Dahl and Walt Disney were fighting so much because they had such strong personalities that they could never reach any agreements to actually adapt The Gremlins into a movie. So he got married in 1943 and published countless adult short stories, very dark adult short stories. In the decade of the 1960s, he had to overcome a series of traumatic events in his personal life. He lost his daughter at 7. She was 7 years old and she died, measles, I think. His son had an accident and was left brain damaged. And his first wife, whom he married in 1953, had a series of strokes, which left her unable to communicate or speak. And this is exactly at the same time when he came back to children's literature, so we can imagine that this is why maybe his literature is so dark, because of what he had to live in his personal life. In the 1980s, he had a very prolific decade during which he published more than 15 children's books. And after his divorce and second marriage in 1983, he died in 1990. Roald Dahl was extremely controversial and is even more controversial today, first as a writer and as a person. So first as a writer, because many experts, parents, and educators alike considered that his writing was macabre, outrageous, sardonic, and gruesome, and the topics he tackled were probably not suitable for children's literature, such as, for example, violence, torture, violent parents, abandonment, bullying, extreme bullying, orphans, and death. So overall, a very dark and violent world. And regarding his personality, he repeatedly made racist and anti-Semitic comments, both in his books, in some articles he published, and during some interviews as well. He published pro-colonialist pamphlets, and the comments he made, for example, when he was living in Kenya, were pretty controversial too. And he was a misogynist. And for example, his first wife called him Roald the Rotten. So you can imagine which kind of man and husband he was. In December 2020, his family, so the Roald Dahl family, released an official statement on their website, so the Roald Dahl Foundation, and they published this official statement to apologize publicly for his opinions and everything he had said during his life. However, many people considered that this apology was fake and insincere, because first it happened right before they signed a huge deal with Netflix to adapt one of his books into a movie. Secondly, because it was too late. It should have come from Roald Dahl himself, not from his children or grandchildren. Now, obviously, we cannot separate Roald Dahl from his illustrator, Quentin Blake, who was born in 1932 and who has illustrated more than 400 books and is still illustrating books now at the age of almost 90 years old. His stroke is very recognizable and very peculiar. And it's funny to mention that he has never liked children and he actually hates them. So my study was focused on anthropomorphic animal characters, and we might ask why focus on this kind of characters. There are 4 reasons to this. First, because they represent the perfect balance between emotional distance, because they are not human, but also emotional closeness, because they possess human characteristics and human abilities. They wear clothes, they speak, the way they relate with each other is just like we humans relate with each other. So they make the perfect characters. The identification is very easy. Secondly, they are universal. They don't have any skin color, they don't have any religion, so it makes it very easy for any child in the world to strongly identify with them. So these 2 reasons actually make them a very powerful tool for writers, children's writers, to ludically teach anything to children. This is why they abound in children's literature, especially in Roald Dahl's stories. And the 4th reason is that animal characters were neglected in previous studies, which focus mainly on human characters and the misogynistic portrayal. this is the corpus that was selected, 4 books by Roald Dahl. They all include animal characters and female animal characters who speak. So I had to discard many of Roald Dahl's books because they either didn't have any female animal characters or because the female animal characters didn't speak at all. So 4 books published between 1961 and 1985 to see if there was any evolution during the course of these 25 years. So James and the Giant Peach, published in 1961, has 4 animal characters. The Magic Finger in 1966 has only 1, the Mother Duck. Fantastic Mr. Fox in 1970 has 1 female animal character, Mrs. Fox. And in 1985, The Giraffe and the Pelly and Me has only 1 too. And plethora of male characters, obviously. So based on the elements identified by Weitzman and her team in 1972, my thesis highlighted 4 ways in which female characters were portrayed in a misogynistic way. First, they are invisible, either literally or by their behavior. So they are completely outnumbered by male characters. They are infantilized and they don't have any identity. For example, in Fantastic Mr. Fox, they are less than children and they are mentioned usually as a group, for example, oh, Mr. Fox and wife and kids. So they don't even have a proper identity. They are regularly forgotten, as in James and the Giant Peach, where male characters regularly repeat during the book, oh, I forgot that you were even here. And they are not even illustrated, which furthers their invisibility. As far as physical description and clothing is concerned, female characters are one-dimensional and very stereotypical. They are kind, they are nice, they're nurturing, they are modest and weak, they blush, and they speak softly and tenderly. They all wear dresses and aprons, as you can see here, for example, the Mother Duck and Mrs. Fox. And it was funny for me to notice that they are the only characters with eyelashes, as if you needed to be a woman to have eyelashes. Regarding their activities, they take care of male characters and kids, essentially, and they are excluded from what could be seen as male activities. For example, shooting in The Magic Finger, swimming in James and the Giant Peach, leaving the house in Fantastic Mr. Fox. So everyone is leaving the house, children included, but not her, or making decisions, for example, in The Giraffe and the Pelly and Me. So they are very passive and homebound, and anytime there is a slight obstacle or a slight problem, they immediately and automatically turn to men asking, what could we do? Regarding their relationships with male characters. So first of all, they don't interact with each other. So female characters don't interact with each other. They only interact with male characters. And we could also say that only male characters interact with them. They don't autonomously interact. So they are dependent. They are very submissive. For example, Mrs. Fox regularly repeats in the book, oh, my husband is so wonderful. He's a fantastic fox. Male characters are at best paternalist and protective with female characters, and at worst they are humiliating and they are bullying them. For example, in James and the Giant Peach, they throw shoes at them when they don't listen, when they don't obey, and they call them great fat lazy brutes. So and the worst part is that actually this kind of behavior is internalized and accepted. So their inferiority is accepted by women. So there is a slight evolution over the course of the 25 years. Female characters are a little bit more included, a little bit more part of the decision making, but they are still portrayed as being inferior. So coming to the conclusions, we can say that gender stereotypes in children's literature, gender stereotypes abound in children's literature, which has terrible consequences on young readers, be them native speakers or learners of English. Roald Dahl, well, his books were published more than 50 years ago, but he is still very influential today. So he was translated into more than 58 languages. His books are being adapted into movies, musicals, at the theater. And he's world renowned today, and he is still very studied at school or in language schools as well. This is why feminist literary criticism is so important. We need to be able to identify the nature and role of female characters, how they are represented, criticize any misrepresentation, and ultimately offer some more adequate representation. There is more awareness of this phenomenon today, but a lack of real evolution, and the need for non-sexist gender-fair literature is higher than ever. Some people have asked me if we should cancel Roald Dahl. I don't think we should cancel him because, well, first of all, if you cancel something, you make it more appealing. And I think that educating is more important than banning. So instead of canceling him, we should provide educators and parents, and then ultimately children, with the right tools to read between the lines and to identify any misrepresentation, to see, for example, the dichotomy between real life female characters and books, female characters from the book, so that they will themselves maybe reject Roald Dahl when they realize this. And we will also create a new generation of future writers who will offer more gender-fair literature. Now, there is always room for further research that could maybe compare maybe the portrayal of female characters between human characters and animal characters, maybe include more books from Roald Dahl, even those with female characters who didn't speak. And for example, also compare with other authors from other countries, or maybe study some authors who were inspired by Roald Dahl to see if anything has changed. These are the references I used for this presentation, and this is the end. So thank you so much for your attention. I know it's a little bit late. You have had many presentations today, but thank you for staying a little bit more. And if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. So I might... should I stop sharing?
You can stop sharing. Thank you very much. Any questions? Bruno, I think, was first, if I'm not mistaken. Bruno, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Sharka, and thank you, Sarah, for the presentation. I more than a question is just that I could totally agree with you. I really do not believe in the culture of cancellation. I think it goes more in the direction of educating parents. I think it's very important to provide these analysis of the stereotypes, because the gender identity is shaped by these stories, these innocent stories that somehow represent the culture of the local context. But cultures are changing. Therefore, I think education is the way to deal with these misrepresentations. So I totally agree with you. It was just the question was just a comment in the same direction.
Well, it's true. If you provide the children with the correct tools, and if they themselves realize how misogynistic the characters are, how misogynistically they are portrayed, they will themselves actually reject it. And also to mention that gender stereotypes are also negative to, I mean, not only to female characters, it's also male characters, but more negatively to female characters, but they affect all genders.
Right, exactly.
Nacho would like to. Thank you very much, Bruno, and thank you, Sarah, for the answer. Nacho, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much for your presentation. I was wondering if while you were studying this topic, did you find any other authors that have a feministic approach, or do you think the misogynistic and that part of the literature is more a generalistic, generational thing, like from the 20s or 30s?
Well, it's true that it is also generational, but, well, you know, Roald Dahl, his last books were published in the late 80s, so not in the 20s. So and his books are still re-edited every year and broadly read. But it is true that today there is a broader offer. You have more options. You can read a lot of children's books which tackle, for example, homosexuality, trans identity, adoption, disability. So you have like and not only white characters, for example. So it's true that today it's easier to find a broader, let's say, a broader offer. But the problem in this case is that Roald Dahl is such a huge name, such an established name, that many people keep reading him because he is famous. So this is not a problem that you don't have any other options, but it is that many people keep on reading him because he is so famous. But yes, they are books with a more feminist approach, or let's say less sexist approach.
Maybe you could briefly comment on your PhD research, because that's connected to it. And why I'm saying this is because it's related to not just question. So now there are other authors who are very famous, and do you think that they have completely changed, or do you think that they can, the approach can be still similar to Roald Dahl's?
Well, it's impossible to generalize, and I don't know all the books published, but it's true that, for example, in the UK at the moment, so Roald Dahl died, and one author is now mentioned as his like spiritual son, so David Williams, who is heavily inspired by Roald Dahl, and I was very surprised to see that. So Roald Dahl is pretty much cancelled today. Many people are online writing about how misogynistic he was and how racist he was. So it's true that less people are now praising him. But so we cancelled him to welcome other authors who are just like him or even worse. So David Williams is publishing books right now. So he started in 2005 or 6, and he is still publishing now. He has a book who's going to be released in a few months. And the way he portrays female characters is the same. So we cancelled one to welcome another.
I just wanted to show Nacho that it's not just there. It's not just when you were born or the time or the generation. It has been happening. And that's why we have to keep on educating the learners and the teachers. And Evelyn, sorry about that, Evelyn. Or Nacho, did you want to ask something else? So, Evelyn, go ahead.
Yeah, I was thinking while you were presenting about what you mentioned at the end, whether we should cancel, this sort of reading or not. And I wanted to ask you first whether you would use this as a resource in an English class, for example, because what comes to my mind when talking about this, since he's such an important writer and it's usually found, within the readings probably in English-speaking countries, but also when we teach English to children, stories or telling stories is a very important tool, right, and very attractive for them. Do you think there is room, for instance, to use this sort of material in order to teach critical thinking, trying also to connect this with the previous presentation, like read the story, but with an idea in mind that the children can actually tell you what they think about it, whether they think the characters might have a different story, or the characters might have a different I don't know, the story could have a different end, or what would they change, or things like that. What do you think about it?
Oh, this is the ultimate goal, actually. So, well,
Yeah.
I would use as much as possible. I would use gender fair literature if possible. But obviously, Roald Dahl is now an established name, and he was banned from reading list in different states in the United States over the years. So he's regularly banned and unbanned and then banned again and unbanned. But as I said, so if you cancel him, you will make him more attractive. That's for sure. That's
Yeah.
the truth. I mean, if you tell me not to read something, I will read it just because it's obviously. So the same with children. So I don't think that's banning him, and he has a very rich universe nonetheless. So I think we could either try to use his less sexist books, maybe, because not all of them are so some of them are a little bit less sexist, but also, yes, giving the children the correct tools, and not just reading, but reading critically and asking them if this is the same as they experience in real life, if, for example, the mother here represents their own mother or not. And I'm not saying so. Globally, female characters or female mothers in Roald Dahl are homebound, which is not the problem. I'm not saying that women should not be homebound. The problem is it's the very only option that is showed here. So this is the goal, actually, to show that children can, to ask children what they think of this and what they would change, and ultimately they will grow up, think differently, and then become ultimately new writers who will offer different books, probably.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
But yes, not canceling. I don't think canceling is the option. I don't think it's the best option, let's say.
I agree.
Thank you, Evelyn. Ranjiva also has a question. Ranjiva, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Go ahead.
Question. Yeah, very. First of all, congratulations, Sarah, for your wonderful presentation. Very to the point. And I was wondering. I mean, you mentioned one thing about the death of his daughter at the age of 6, 7, 8, 7 years somewhere. Generally, when I read literature or whatever I have worked, I have not worked very deeply with literature. My field is different, but there is always a impact or influence, personal influence or personal impact of death. For example, I was working with one writer recently. Same thing happened, death of his son at a very early age, and this transformed into some kind of elements related to death, related to some very dark in the writing. So whether this kind of death of his daughter also impacted on his writing, because that was 1960s, if I'm right, and he still was writing till 80s. So this death of the daughter somehow reflected in his writing. And second thing, what was his background? I mean, this all because the way he was writing, I don't know, because I'm not very familiar about the writer. His background because the background of a writer also impacts his way of writing, his approach. So somewhere do you see that his upbringing, maybe it British or Norway, I don't know, where has impacted his writing style?
I would say definitely. Some experts say that we should separate the life of the author and their writing, but in this case, I would say that it was very intertwined. So I think he lost his sister as well. He lost his father at an early age. Then he was bullied at school. He had a very traumatic childhood. He was sent to some old boys' school where he was spanked and physically punished. Then he lost his daughter. Then his son didn't die, but his brain left the damage for the rest of his life. So I would say that his personal life was very traumatic too, and he was sent. So he participated in the war. He was almost killed as a pilot. So I would say that definitely. And so in all his books, the parents are horrible, but really like dark, horrible, really horrible parents. So I would say his parents were not horrible, but they were very strict. And they were Norwegian, and he was saying that they were maybe colder, and they were not giving him like hugs or let's say. So I would say that definitely his personal life, which was pretty traumatic, influenced his writing, probably. But many authors had traumatic private lives, and they turned this into something opposite, maybe more light. So I don't know if it's the only reason why his writings are so dark, but it is definitely one explanation.
Yeah, thank you.
Any more questions? I think we are running out of time, so if there are no more questions, we are going to thank Sarah and invite the next group of speakers. Well done. Thank you very much, Sarah. The next presentation is supposed to start in 2 minutes, so Sarah, you can relax now and prepare for the next presentation. I am going to wait 1 more minute. Yeah, so just in case somebody, and I'm going to also introduce the group. Okay, let's just wait 1 minute so that in case. Professor Sumonte, we can see the next slide. You have to change the, sorry about that. Try one more time.
Can you ask if the rest of the group is here, please?
Yes. We need Patricia Escobar and Maria Arana.
Can you see the presentation?
What you have to do is click on those 3 dots. Click on the 3 dots under you. Exactly. Let me see what is there. And I think it's ocultar vista de moderador. Try this. Try ocultar vista del moderador. Try this one. Try. No. How do you? Anybody knows how to?
Okay, let me.
Evelyn, do you know how to close it so that we can see only one slide?
You have to say the presentation only, but when, as I said in my email, you can use PowerPoint Live if you want. You have to upload the PowerPoint, and then you could see the moderator view, and we can see the slides. Otherwise, you just have to share the window with the full presentation.
Wait a minute.
But there is an option.
Yeah.
Because I remember that I had the same problem in my hybrid classes, and you can switch it off, and it's somewhere in the 3 dots. I don't remember which of the functions.
In any case, I have a copy of the presentation, so if you have any issues, I can share it.
Only 1 minute, and then to see if I
sure, no problem.
Please, so sorry.
No problem.
Okay, let me see.
Now
Yes,
we can see it. Super. So let me
excellent.
just
Thanks a
introduce
lot.
your
Yes.
group very, very briefly. So welcome, Patricia Escobar, Maria Araya, and Valeria Sumonte. That's our last group of speakers. The title of their presentation is called Intercultural Development in the History, Geography, and Social Sciences Textbooks, First and Second Grade. So I'm going to start with Patricia. Patricia Escobar Navarro is a fifth-year student at the Catholic University of the Maule. She's going to be a teacher of Spanish as a first language, and she has received her BA in Education from the Catholic University of the Maule. Maria Ignacia Araya Rojas is also a fifth-year student at the Catholic University of the Maule. She's going to be a teacher of Spanish as a first language as well, and she has also obtained her BA in Education from the Catholic University of the Maule. Valeria Sumonte has a longer trajectory. She was awarded her PhD in Education in 2019 and holds a master's degree in Linguistics. Apart from that, she has been working as an English teacher and a director of the language department at the Faculty of Educational Sciences at the Catholic University of the Maule. As a researcher, she gained a Fondesit initiation project. Her research interests are interculturality and second language teaching and learning. Welcome. You can start with your presentation. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for your presentation, Sharka. And please, I want to remind you what Sharka said, to repeat again, that Patricia and Maria Ignacia, both of them are Spanish language teachers. So it's going to be a challenge for them to present in English. Okay. So Patricia, you're going to start.
Problem. Migration has a free-ordered role in the economy, politics, and social structure of each country, and in particular characterize the order and disorder. According to this, it means that there are continued flow of illegal and illegal people who speak different language and bring with them diverse custom, generation significant social changes to the country to which they arrive. Chile is a destination for many migrants. It is established there are 1,462,103 people. Likewise, it is shown that the epicenter of migratory waves to the country come mainly from Venezuela, Peru, and Haiti. In this sense, Education plays a fundamental role in generating significant changes in a diverse society. Intercultural education is proposed as an education model to respond to the multicultural reality located in an environment where empathy, respect, and interest for the other and the other is promoted. Therefore, it is required to promote the development of contextualized teaching adapted to the particular needs of each student. However, despite the knowledge that we live in an intercultural society, intercultural education is still focused primarily on the native people of Chile. Textbooks are considered a tool to introduce different content, but it's not clear if school texts promote the cultural dimension proposed by the national curriculum. It would be interesting to know how diversity and interculturality are taught in national education, especially if today there are a large number of multicultural education communities.
Theoretical framework. Interculturality arises as a response to different social contents and from divergent objectives, according to Stephanie, as is to refer to interrelation between people of groups of people from different cultures in a space of mutual enrichment through dialogic relationship in search to a stable coexistence between them on the basis of equality, no discrimination, and respect for diversity. Interculturality implies interaction, exchange, segregation, reciprocity, interdependence, and solidarity. Therefore, the conception of intercultural community competence should be understood as the set of skill uses by individuals from diverse cultures in order to have an effective communication. There are several models of intercultural community competence, but for this research, we use the model proposed by Fajardo, who adapts the model proposed by Cantero to the Latin American context and reality. Seek the develop on a skill that allows speakers to establish intercultural relationships that are mainly characterized by coexistence, positive interest, trust, cooperation, peaceful regulation of conflict, dialogue, and debate. The willingness to reciprocally translate the language into other language, and the ability to communicate with the other cultures. This model is composed by 3 dimensions that correspond to knowledge, attitude, and skill and abilities. This dimension is composed of a specific micro skill, synthesizing what the intercultural speaker speaks to develop in didactic intervention. The first dimension, knowledge, with its 6 micro skills. The second dimension, attitude, with the 9 micro skills. And the third dimension, skill and abilities, and the 8 micro skill. The Chilean education system is basically mainly governed by the new General Education Law approved in 2009, and the design, development, and implementation of national curricula is coordinated by the Curriculum and Evaluation Unit from the Ministry of Education. The curriculum framework establishes the learning and transversal objectives of education, being this curricular basis. This fulfills the mission of providing a common cultural basis of the whole country through learning objectives established for each course or level. The curricular basis from 1st to 6th grade will guide the analysis of activities to develop of intercultural community competence in school texts. For this, it is essential to know the presence of the concept of interculturality in the Chilean educational system. It is also important to mention that there exists the bilingual intercultural program. However, this program only gives emphasis to native peoples. Therefore, it does not respond to reality and needs present by educational institutions that receive migrant students, producing a gap in educational policies to integrate foreign students in Chilean classrooms, according to Barrios Valenzuela and Paulo Julian.
Methodology. The research corresponds to a qualitative approach study aimed at interpretive analysis of educational activities focused on international migration, present in the history, geography, and social science textbooks for first and second grade. We will support with a curricular basis from first to sixth grade. The selection of text is carried out under the following inclusion criteria. School textbooks are used at present and the school. They are free of charge for students, considering the subjects that in their learning objectives directly or indirectly state their importance and appreciation for diversity, migration, respect for the other, in los books writing in Spanish. For the no?
Sorry.
Sí.
Yeah. We're not hearing you. We are not hearing you. Yes.
For the development of intercultural communicate competence proposed in Fajardo model.
Okay. Now, the results. In relation to whether the student texts cover the micro skills of the dimensions proposed by Fajardo, as Maria Ignacia said, our analysis is focused on this model, Fajardo's model. He proposed it in 2012, and it's particular because it is her model is based on the Latin American context. And as they said, as Patricia and Maria Ignacia said, this model has three big dimensions. One of them is knowledge, and it means that all the micro abilities that are included in knowledge are related to the idea of what we know. Then the second one is related to attitudes, and this one include aspect in order to understand how we behave when facing someone different. And finally, the last one is about skills. That leads to people to reflect, to criticize, to analyze. And under this model, we analyzed language and communication and history books, textbooks, but while the process, we discovered that the language communication books didn't include much of the intercultural aspects. So we decided to go on with the history, geography, and social sciences textbooks used at school at this moment. And also when studying all from first grade to sixth grade. Also when studying the sixth grade, we also discovered that first grade and second grade included intercultural activities. But it does not, these books don't follow what the Ministry of Education says, because in the curriculum, they established that one of the objectives is that the intercultural activity must be included in textbooks. In order to give you an example, here we have one activity that was taken from one of the books from page 25. And here it says in question 2, here we have 2 questions. It says, the first question says, ¿qué harías cuando ves que algunos compañeros no cuidan la escuela? Si llega a tu barrio un niño de otro país, ¿cómo te comportarías con él? ¿Cómo lo recibirías? When analyzing, especially the second questions according to Fajardo's models, we concluded this. I mean, in this activity, we can identify aspect of the microabilities in the 3 dimensions. And most of them I covered. You can see in the first 1 dimension of knowledge is 5 out of 6 microabilities are covered. In the second one, all the microabilities are covered. And in the last one, 7 out of 8 microabilities are covered. So here we can say that the promotion of the interculturality among the classroom are included. Then we also included not only the words, I mean sentences, but also graphics. And here we have a picture, and here we have 2 questions. ¿Crees que estos niños o niñas son del mismo país? ¿Qué características los diferencian entre sí? So when analyzing the graphics and also the questions, we decided, I mean, according to Fajardo's models, that the 3 microabilities from the dimension knowledge were covered here, 2 from the attitudes, and the 3rd question included only 1 from abilities, and the question number 2 covered 2 microabilities. And this is here, if you can see, this is the analysis of this photograph. When we analyzed this photograph, we found that all the microabilities were included in this page. So according to what Fajardo is proposing, this page includes most of the microabilities that make students to understand others, people coming from different cultures. Therefore, the activities related to international migration first encompass some microabilities proposed by Fajardo for the development of the interculturality within the classroom, and contribute to development of interculturality by teaching students through various strategies, such as image recognition, projects, infographics, games, etc. Even so, it is considered that there are few activities related to migration, and many of them are very simple and superfluous, which do not help to a significant learning regarding intercultural relations. Furthermore, it's discouraging that only 2 school textbooks of a subject include these topics, which are so important at present, considering that Chile is nowadays a multicultural country. So it has to go on to be also an intercultural country.
Conclusion. As evident, there is little present of topic related on international migration in the book of a student from 1st to 6th grade. And this is also most important in the stage of the school development that the students are in, since the new generation who share the most with the migrant population and with a multicultural society aiming at interculturality. Therefore, interculturality and above all, intercultural community competence is a topic that should be developed at all educational levels, encouraging students to learn a little about other cultures of contact, teaching them to respect other custom and tradition, as well as learning how to communicate correctly to learn more about them, among many other aspects. To be able to integrate the development of intercultural community competence in the educational system, it is utmost important to make a fairer society without discrimination, but creating awareness that there are differences that can be elemental of mutual knowledge. The durant new cultures and evolve into new culturally diverse society. Today present a great challenge and evolve and possibility to work in multicultural educational communities in search to strengthening intercultural relations. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Are there any questions? Feel free to ask.
It could be in Spanish.
Well done, ladies. I know it's difficult.
Yeah.
Not easy, it's very challenging. I'm going to start and let's see if somebody else is going to ask any questions. So basically, if I understand, what you say is that the intercultural competence, communicative competence, is missing in those books. But I'm just thinking now, how should this be solved? Because if you want to elaborate another manual or another book, that would take years. You know what I mean? So we would start elaborating the book now, and the book would be published in a year or two, or I don't know how many years that could take. Or could we maybe help the teachers by providing them some extra materials, which would include that intercultural competence? So I don't know. That was just a random thought, let's say.
So it's a bit difficult to answer that question because teachers have to follow the curriculum. Mm-hmm. So we think that there is like a disconnection between the general objectives of the national program and also the textbooks, because the textbooks are not promoting what the objectives are saying. So you can see also, if you go to the bases curriculares, you are going to find some objectives that which are related to the intercultural competence that must be promoted at schools. But the book are not including that aspect, only in some units. And also we discovered other things in the books. They are different. So from the first at the sixth grade, it's like they don't follow the same structure. And they and also it's like, even though it's the same editorial, but they also, if you see it, they also follow a different structure. So sometimes it's difficult to follow them. And if teachers at schools, they have to work with books. So they teach according to the books. So if they want to add extra material, it's going to be a bit more difficult, because sometimes they don't have much time in order to finish with the books, and they have to do it.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking, how difficult it would be to implement it actually, or how to include the competence inside. Professor Fuentes, go ahead, ask. Thank you very much for the...
Thanks.
If you can ask in Spanish, Andrea, please. Is it possible, please?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Bueno, primero iba a felicitar a María Ignacia y Patricia por presentar en inglés. Lo hicieron muy bien. Me gustó muchísimo escucharla. Ojalá que sus compañeras y profesores estén escuchándola también, que se sientan orgullosos de ocupar la L2, ¿cierto?, para poder presentar académicamente. Así que la felicito. Y Y lo segundo era en relación a los planes y programas, que era lo que la profesora Valeria estaba diciendo ahora en este cruce, porque si bien es cierto, los libros son una guía para el profesor, también hay planes y programas que deben tenerse en consideración al momento de planificar las clases y de ir viendo cómo se entrecruza, ¿cierto?, todos los tipos de habilidades, destreza y contenido que tienen que aprender los estudiantes. Entonces, no sé si tuvieron como la oportunidad de revisar planes y programas, de revisar las bases curriculares, cómo ha ido tal vez evolucionando esto. Me disculpan si lo dijeron antes, pero como que me conecté y me desconecté, entonces no sé de qué año son los libros que ustedes analizaron. Porque en inglés, por ejemplo, los estándares actualmente hablan de la competencia comunicativa intercultural, hablan de cómo el profesor debe de una u otra forma ir incluyendo actividades que den cuenta de aquello, pero no lo sé digamos, en el área de ustedes, lo que estaban recién comentando. Entonces, si nos pudieran contar un poquito de eso, sería bastante interesante.
María Ignacia o Patricia.
Ya, muchas gracias por los comentarios al comienzo. Para nosotros esto es realmente un desafío. Con respecto a las bases curriculares, nosotros revisamos las bases curriculares que están hoy presentes. No recuerdo de qué año es, 2012 creo, ¿cierto?
Sí, la de 2012.
Son las bases curriculares presentes, las revisamos y claro, ahí no hay mucho sobre interculturalidad, sino que se habla más de diversidad cultural, son cosas como diversidad y otras cosas como valor, el respeto por el otro, pero no hay tanto de interculturalidad. También se menciona que Chile en el 2007 crea el programa intercultural bilingüe, que también va con este objetivo de recibir a la población migrante, pero el problema de este programa que solo se centró en la población indígena, que obviamente no está mal, pero solamente era la población indígena, los pueblos originarios de Chile. Entonces no se toma mucho en consideración a las poblaciones migrantes y por sobre todo a las poblaciones migrantes que hablan otro idioma. Entonces, claro, nosotras revisamos los libros de lenguaje, historia. Los de media sí abarcan estos temas de migración, pero dijimos, ¿qué pasa con los libros de enseñanza básica, la educación inicial de los niños? Ellos son los que más comparten con estudiantes extranjeros. Por tanto, eso, revisamos las bases. Claro, en las bases no se habla en objetivos específicos sobre interculturalidad ni diversidad, solamente se habla como un objetivo general de las bases. Entonces nos pareció demasiado interesante ese tema y que se abarcara tan pocas actividades respecto a esto mismo.
Claro, sí. Y también no sé si revisaron como la editorial, digamos, de cuál era el tipo de alineación que tenía la gente que diseñó el libro, que dependiendo de qué lado son, ¿cierto? Políticamente hablando, también a veces tienen ciertos sesgos. No sé si tuvieron la oportunidad de revisar eso o se enfocaron solamente en lo que expusieron ahora.
No, lamentablemente no nos enfocamos en Bueno, sí nos dimos cuenta que había diferentes editoriales, se enfocaban en los libros. No era solo una editorial para todos los libros, sino que habían diferentes. Pero nos enfocamos más en el tema de ver qué actividades tenían los libros y sobre todo en actividades de migración, porque sí, como dice mi compañera, sí habían actividades integradas a los pueblos indígenas, pero no hacia la migración, siendo que hoy en día la migración es un tema súper importante porque estamos viendo que Chile es un foco de migración, entonces llegan muchos migrantes y es importante que los niños ya en la enseñanza, en su primera enseñanza, en la enseñanza básica, ellos tengan conocimiento y sepan relacionarse con estos niños de otras culturas.
Ok, gracias Patricia y María Ignacia.
¿Más preguntas? No veo
No
ninguna
more
más.
questions.
No more questions. Estamos cansados, estamos aquí desde hace un rato. Por eso. No, fue muy interesante la presentación.
Thanks
Si
a
no
lot.
hay más preguntas, les voy a preguntar, prender las cámaras para hacer un screenshot de nuevo, poner sonrisas así de grandes. Y después los voy a dejar ir. La que siempre me molesta que tiene que tener la gente. Ya. A ver si alguien más quiere prender la cámara. Voy a esperar un poquitico. Nacha está ahí. Perfecto, Alejandro. Eso. Perfecto. Ya. Veamos si alguien más. Alejandro, ¿querías prender la cámara?
La tengo prendida.
No te vemos, no te vemos.
¿No, no me ven?
No.
Está prendida.
Te veíamos antes, pero después
I see
desapareció.
him. I can see him.
Ah, now I see you. Now I see you. Okay, super.
Wait a
So-
second. Wait a second, because I want to.
Like a ghost.
Ah, super.
Really?
No, I think you can see more people.
Yes. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you very much, Ellen. We were all together. Okay, so smile, please. 3, 2, 1. Perfect. I've got it. Thank you very much for your cooperation. There you are. You are all beautiful. Thank you so much. So tomorrow we will be expecting you at 10 o'clock, correct? I'm going to
May I
check.
say something before
Yes,
everyone
please.
stays?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Since we had some issues with the chat today, we are going to send a new link to connect tomorrow. I will send this to all presenters and all attendees. Okay, so check your email. So tomorrow you will be able to use the chat. That's it. Thank you so much, and we apologize for the inconvenience.
Thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for sharing your research. I have enjoyed it very much. As I said, or I mentioned before, there was a lot of variety, so I have learned a lot today, and I got some ideas for my own research, so thank you for that. And tomorrow we are going to meet up at 10 o'clock and start with Professor Fuente Alba, and then we go on with the rest of the presentation. So have a nice afternoon, everybody.
Oh, the same
And
for
I
you.
hope to see you
Thank you.
tomorrow.
Bye-bye. See you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
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 See you
Bye-bye.
tomorrow.